Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel Learn to Code by Saurav. Today in this video, we are going to create REST API to get single user by ID. In the previous video, we had created a REST API to save a single user into the DB. And people who are new to the channel, I recommend to watch the previous videos in the series. Link is in the description below. Now let's start with the video. Let's start by creating a method in a service class to fetch the user from the DB. So let's go to service class, user service, create a method, public return type is user because we are going to retrieve user object from the DB, and we'll send the response to the client as user object. Method name fetch user long user ID. The user ID is long type because we have the same type in user object, as you can see here. So now let's write return statement, return user repository dot find by id. Let's search find by id. So pass user id here. It will return optional. Okay, so let's write one more code. Return user or else throw runtime exception. Do not worry about this syntax. This is a lambda expression. So I'll make a separate video on optional and lambda expression. User not found. So this line of code, it, it means user repository will call this method find by id with the user id. It will return the user data with optional object. So if user is not available in the optional object, then it will throw runtime exception mentioning user not found. This is pretty simple with the help of Spring Data GPA to communicate with database and perform CRUD operations like create, delete, read, update, and all. So Spring Data provides out-of-the-box functionality for CRUD operations. So now we are done with the retrieval logic to fetch the user by ID. So this ID will be created when we create a user and will return as a response to the client. From there we can pick the ID and use that ID to fetch the respective user. Now let's start creating an API to fetch the user. Let's open user controller class. Create a new endpoint, public response entity of user, fetch user by id. I'll name this method name. Let's write path variable of long type user id. Let's do the mapping, get mapping because the request is going to be a GET request. So when we create something, we'll we map the endpoint as post mapping. When we get something, we use get mapping. That's a guideline for that's a guideline of REST APIs. User ID, user user equal to user service dot fetch user, the method which we have created. Pass this user ID, return statement, new response entity, user, and the status. Okay, so let me explain you this line. So when the request comes to slash user slash ID, mentioning the ID, so it will land here in this endpoint, and this ID will be mapped to this ID, and will pass this ID in the fetch user method parameter. So this method will be invoked. It will go to user service class. This line of code will be executed. If the requested ID is available in the DB, then user will be returned, or else exception will be thrown. This is very straightforward line. This is very straightforward code. Now that the endpoint has been created to fetch the user by ID, now we should be able to test this API. Now let's test this API through the Postman. Now let's open Postman. I have the Postman open. Let's create few users into the DB. We will retrieve those users one by one with their IDs. Let's start the server. As you can see, the server has been started on port number 8080 on Rocket server. Let's create some users into the DB, and we will retrieve those users with their respective IDs from one by one. Let's go to Postman, create few users, John Doe. Let's hit. So this user has been created into the DB. As you can see, the status 201 created with the ID 1. In the previous video, we had created one user. That's why the ID is 2 now. Let's create few more users. John 1 2, John 1 2. Now that we have 3 users, ID is 3. So let's try to fetch these users one by one. Open another tab, copy this URL. I'll keep the request tab is get because we are going to retrieve the user. So just mention the URL will be same. Just mention the ID, the user ID you want to fetch slash 1. Let's see if user is there or not. This user is there in the DB with this ID. Let's fetch few more users. To user is also available with the ID 2, which we have just created. Let's see the ID 3. Now let's check if we give the wrong ID, let's say 4 or 5. We already know that we have created three users into the DB. So now let's check if now let's check by passing the random number. Let's say 4, 5, 6, or 7, 10, 8, anything. So let's say 10. So I so it should throw an exception or error if we pass the wrong ID. Let's check. Yeah, we are getting internal server error 500. Path is slash user slash ID with the 10 value. So if we see in the code log, you can see the message in the logs. User not found, a runtime exception. Where it is generated from user service dot java class line number 20. This line. So if the user is not available, the user is not available with the ID 10. That's why it is throwing exception. So as of now, we have not handled this exception properly. That's why it is giving 500 internal server error. So I'll make a separate video on this. I will show you there how to handle exceptions properly and send a proper exception response, error response, and success response and all. So in this video, we have created a get endpoint to retrieve the user by their ID and tested it with the Postman. In the next video, we will create a get endpoint to fetch all the users from the DB. So this is it for now. Thank you guys. If you find this video helpful, please do like, share and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.